What is up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm really excited because we have the brand new O4 Pro Air unit against an actual action camera, which is the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro. I'll put them to the test against each other and see whether the O4 Pro can actually replace a real action camera when it comes to FPV flying. Really excited for this one, hopefully you are as well. Let's get started straight away. Now let's examine the footage real quick as we have both cameras side by side. First we have the O4 Air Unit Pro on the left, and then we have the Osmo Action 5 Pro on the right. For starters, I started flying with manual camera settings. I tried making the clips as best looking as possible by using manual camera settings. So the footage has been recorded in 4K 50 frames per second in DLOG-M color profile with a shutter speed of 1/100th. A ISO between 100 and 800. I chose that to not lock it because I'm passing through some darker areas and I wanted to let the cameras adjust accordingly. I'm not really sure what the white balance was, but it was the same on both cameras. Then I turned off the stabilization, of course, because I wanted to use Gyroflow to stabilize both shots later in post. And finally, I graded the shots. I transformed the DLOG-M footage to Rec. 709. I applied my own LUT to those shots, both of them exactly the same way. And then I added some sharpness in post as I never use it built in. And you will see how the shots look like before grading and then after grading, but I wanted to make them look as good as possible by looking as natural as possible as well. From what I'm seeing on the screens right now, without really pixel peeping too much, I think they are neck and neck. And if I can even say so, I think in some areas the O4 Air Unit Pro looks tiny bit better than what we are seeing on the Osmo Action 5 Pro. And I'm purposely flying towards the sun in some areas so you can see how the cameras adapt to the sunlight when the sunlight is hitting the camera directly. The glow from the sun looks very identical, I would say. For this exact scenario where we have a lot of good lighting and a lot of natural strong sunlight, I think they are neck and neck, and it's really hard to see which one is which. Jumping towards the next test, which I decided to conduct all in automatic camera settings. So everything is set to auto, the white balance, the shutter speed, the ISO, everything was set to auto, and the stabilization was the built-in stabilization. So that's something that I wanted to test as well. If you don't want to deal with color grading and stabilizing your footage, this is what you can expect from both of these cameras. Now the O4 Air Unit Pro has a little bit more warmer image, and the sun when shining directly at the camera has a lot more glow, whereas on the Osmo Action 5 Pro we have a little bit more dull and flat looking footage even when the color has been set to 10-bit normal color profile. It's still kind of dull. For some reason I wasn't really expecting it to be that desaturated. However, both look great. Once again, it's just something that I personally wouldn't use for FPV because the image looks a lot less vibrant, a lot less appealing to me, and those small things that you do when you lock your camera settings, when you color grade your footage, they do really go a long way to make your footage look so much better. That's why I'm really a huge advocate for always shooting in DLOG-M, for always color grading your footage yourself, adding sharpness later in post, not really relying on what the camera decides to use by itself, because you can extract so much more out of these cameras when you know what you're doing. And I think this example here is a good way to demonstrate that. The stabilization is great as well. It's not bad by any means, but this is what you can expect from these cameras when compared side by side at exactly the same conditions. However, here's where you can see the biggest difference between those two cameras. This has been shot right after the sunset. You can see the orange glow at the horizon, but for some reason the Osmo Action 5 Pro has a lot better quality here. You can see so much more details. The sharpness is on another level. You can see so much more in the footage, and that probably has something to do with how the processor of the Osmo Action 5 Pro works with the data that it has been given. Because when looking at those shots, when stabilizing them, I noticed that the bitrate was also quite different. So we had 66 megabits bitrate on the Osmo Action 5 Pro and almost double the bitrate on the 04 Air Unit Pro with 115 megabits per second. So we have a lot more megabits per second, but that doesn't mean that we have better quality. So the processor is doing all the work here, in my opinion, because it's giving you a lot better final image to work with, even before grading it. And especially after grading it, it looks so much better on the Osmo Action 5 Pro. So to me, in case you're shooting a lot at darker times when you have less light to work with, this is where you will notice the biggest difference between those two cameras. In bright and sunny conditions, like you saw in the first two examples that I gave you, you can't really notice the difference, but here the difference is quite noticeable. And again, I'm using exactly the same camera settings on both of these cameras with exactly the same way to grade the shots. Everything is set to be exactly the same, but the results are different. When we compare these two cameras side by side for FPV, there are a few important considerations that I want to talk about. Let's start by all the pros of ditching your action camera in favor of only using the 04 Air Unit Pro. First off, the number one thing you'll notice when you ditch your action camera from your drone is the huge performance boost straight away. Not having to deal with that additional 200 or so grams on top of your frame will make your drone feel like a rocket, because that increased speed, that agility, that smoothness will feel very, very different, because in FPV, every single gram matters, and this will be a huge difference to you. I personally love flying my drones without an additional action camera on top. I simply don't do it because I want to capture the shots in the best quality possible. But now with this huge improved quality that we have here on the 04 Air Unit Pro, you will not have to deal with that. Even before, the 03 Air Unit was great, but now it's amazing to even think about what FPV is turning into, because the quality is very, 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 very similar to what you get on an action camera. Like you saw from all the different examples that I gave you in this video, the quality is just perfect from a single camera that gives you FPV feed and also records on the built-in memory or on your SD card. It doesn't really matter, but it's such an increased quality that will probably make 99% of the people out there forget about flying with an additional camera on top, because it's that good. It's seriously good, and especially if you're flying in good lighting conditions where you have a lot of bright sunlight, it's incredible. Combining that with manual camera settings, using DLOG-M, using Gyroflow to stabilize your footage, and you have all the great tools necessary to make a great looking, jaw-dropping FPV video. One more time, I will plug my own LUTs because I've been working hard on them to make them work with every single video possible shot in DLOG-M. All you need to do is throw a conversion LUT first and then add your creative look to it, and it will transform the look of your videos straight away with a press of a button. I'm super pumped about those LUTs, and this is just one more reminder to check them out in the description if you want to take advantage of them. Finally, for those shots that are a little bit more risky and require a little bit more precision, I would say, it's far more enjoyable and less stressful to not having to worry about an additional $300, $400, $500 action camera on top and only worry about your drone. That will not only make it more enjoyable for you to fly, but will also push you towards trying out new things, more risky maneuvers, more crazy shots, and end up making you a better pilot, I think. Now, of course, nothing is that perfect. There are a few cons that I want to mention real quick, and first of all, obviously, is the redundancy. With FPV especially, having an additional camera that you can shoot on could be a lifesaver. There are so many instances where I have put the wrong settings, or I have stopped recording when I wanted to start recording, or I have damaged something and my files got corrupted. There are so many instances where I got saved by the fact that my Air unit is saving my footage, and my action camera didn't save it. So having that redundancy, that second piece of equipment that will save your footage is great. And it could be a lifesaver if something important happens and you want to capture it and you end up losing the footage. Having that peace of mind is great. The second thing is, depending on the frame that you're using, you might experience some props in view. So if you have a Deadcat oriented frame, you probably don't have to worry about that at all. But if you have an X frame, sometimes you might experience that. Now, personally, I don't have this issue since I'm using an X frame by Gap RC, the Vapor X. However, since the Air Unit 04 sticks out so much from the front, it doesn't really see the props, whereas with a regular 03 Air Unit, I was able to see them. So maybe it's just the way the camera is mounted, but just something that you need to be aware of. Depending on your frame, you might see those props in view, but an easy way to counter that is just zoom in a tiny bit on your footage. It's not really a big deal. Zoom in so you don't see them in view anymore and you're golden. Next is your visibility. That could be limited a little bit, especially if you want to extract the most out of your 04 Air Unit Pro and you lock your camera settings into manual mode. Now, when you do that, you will probably use an ND filter as well. And depending on the lighting conditions, you might go from a darker to a brighter spot or vice versa. And that will limit your visibility a little bit if your camera settings have been locked. So of course, if you want to escape from that potential issue, you can not lock them and just have a variable ISO, for example, or a variable shutter speed. It's really depending on your area where you fly, or you just need to deal with it. It's not ideal, I know, but it's the risk you need to take when using just one camera. And finally, the last thing I want to mention as a con is the frame rate limitations that obviously when using a single camera are going to occur no matter what. So if you're looking for the best flying experience, you might want to shoot in higher frame rates, so that way your eyes can easily adapt to the changes of the environment. You will probably see best inside the goggles, but that is not the most cinematic way to capture footage, because higher frame rates require higher shutter speeds as well, and they affect the look of your videos as well. So for best cinematic purposes, you might want to use a lower frame rate, but in that way you will have worse flying experience inside your goggles. So a good way to kind of combat this is to go 50 frames per second or 60 frames per second depending on your area, and record in that frame rate. So for me, 4K 50 frames per second is my standard frame rate nowadays, because I'm able to not only enjoy my flying experience with a little bit of a higher frame rate inside the goggles, but also that works great on a 25 frames per second timeline. That way I can use this regular 50 frames per second clip and use it in real time, or also slow it down by 50% if something interesting happens and I want to emphasize on it. I still have a little bit of flexibility to kind of slow it down a little bit, so I can use that in post if I want to. So my final verdict: can the 04 Air Unit Pro replace an action camera? I think yes, absolutely yes. For 99% of the people out there, the 04 Air Unit Pro would be the best possible action camera that they can use for FPV. There's no really need to attach anything on top of your drone anymore. Even for commercial purposes, I think the cons that I mentioned are far less important than all the pros that you're going to encounter while using the 04 Air Unit Pro. And especially if you know what you're doing, if you know how to stabilize and color grade your footage, you will be golden. This thing is just amazing. So for many people, myself included, it will completely eliminate the need for an action camera, and it will make me use my drones even more and risk them a little bit more to get those super nice, great looking shots. So I hope you enjoyed this little comparison between the Osmo Action 5 Pro and the 04 Air Unit Pro. It's been a real pleasure making it happen. If you end up enjoying this video, please don't hesitate on clicking on the like button and subscribe for many more videos like this one. This is Mike from Drone Supremacy. Never stop flying, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Ciao.